Welcome back to the County News Podcast. I'm Charlie Ban.
And I'm Nicole Weissman. And today we have our first live recorded podcast episode, a recent conversation between Mark Rattacco, NACo's Chief Government Affairs Officer, and U.S. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, and Loudoun County, Virginia Chair Phyllis Randall, who is also chair of NACo's Health Policy Steering Committee. This conversation was recorded live at NACo's office and focused on social isolation. Charlie, why did they choose to talk about this? How is it important to counties?
This goes back to 2023 when former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy released an advisory warning about the dangers of social isolation. It's been a long-term issue for Senator Murphy, and as a mental health practitioner herself, Chair Randall is also worried about it.
Definitely. And I think one of the reasons that this touches so many folks is that going back to the pandemic, even before 2023, this is something everyone got a little bit of firsthand experience with. I know that for an accompanying County News article, you also talked to someone else. Tell us a little bit about that.
I added a rural perspective from Kate Giblin. She's the Senior Center Manager at the Aging and Disability Resource Center of Portage County, Wisconsin. And they received a grant from the American Rescue Plan Act to provide programming to combat social isolation. And they were able to add a few events to the more rural parts of the county to bring people together and just get people out of that isolating mood.
So this live conversation and that article going hand in hand to give a perspective on the county role in addressing social isolation. Let's give it a listen.
First, U.S. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who has emerged as one of the nation's most thoughtful voices on social isolation and authoring legislation and really pushing us for how to think differently about this issue. And Chair Phyllis Randall of Loudoun County, Virginia, who not only is the elected chair of Loudoun County, Virginia, but has a dual perspective because she is also a practicing mental health therapist and as also NACo's chair of the Health Policy Steering Committee, along with many, many other titles and hats that you wear. Loudoun County, as you all know, because we're so close, it is one of Virginia's fastest growing counties with 430,000 residents, and Loudoun County has faced the challenge of this growing population, technological change, and this social isolation issue. So today we are tackling one of the most pressing but often overlooked public health crises, social isolation and loneliness. And it really might be informing our politics and our country in ways that we don't often think about. And so counties, we think, are uniquely positioned to talk about this because we are the owners of a lot of this social infrastructure, of the libraries, the parks, the behavioral health clinics, the ERs, the real actual infrastructure and social infrastructure, but we can also be conveners of people and connectors in our community. So Senator Murphy, let me start with you. Let's talk about this issue. Why are we here today? What is social isolation for people who haven't thought a lot about it? And what is the government solution to it? And why is it a public policy issue?
Yeah, this is one of the most important challenges that families and society faces that isn't getting the airing that it deserves right now. I came to this issue of social isolation through a bunch of different prisms. First, just as a parent, I've got two teenagers who, 4 or 5 years ago when I started thinking about this issue, were becoming teenagers, and I was, watching a generation that was retreating away from time with peers and friends into their smartphones, into themselves, and there was just no mistaking what was happening, in particular with this generation. But I also, was viewing the political moment, trying to look for answers as to why the country, kind of felt like it was coming apart at the seams. And I know, we won't, get into the politics of the moment, but there's just no question that we live in an era of more political instability, more political violence. We also, have these rising indicators of social unhealth, like rates of self-harm and person-on-person violence and addiction, and that's coming from somewhere. And you just don't have to sort of scratch the surface of social data really hard to, understand something radical has happened in this country in the last really 20 years. You go from 2003 to 2023, and the amount of time that we spend with friends has cratered. This has never happened in the history of human beings. We literally, in a 20-year period of time, are spending 50% less time with each other, and epidemic rates of individuals saying that they are feeling deeply lonely. We are solidaristic creatures, meaning we're not meant to spend lots of time by ourselves. I mean, we're built to be in communion with others, and so when in a 20-year period of time you're not with other human beings at the rate that you used to, your body and your brain start to break. They start to break, and of course, our former Surgeon General, gave us this, great set of data and tools to tell us that, your body actually does break when you're lonely, that you have higher rates of heart disease and dementia, but our society starts to break as well, because we grow first sad, then angry, then fearful, then mistrustful, and without that kind of social trust, it's hard to hold a country together. So this to me was a choice we made. There are a bunch of decisions the government made and that they did and government didn't do that led us to this point where it's really easy to live a life of isolation, where it's really easy to retreat. And what I'm hoping to build, along with so many others who are here for this conversation on both sides of the aisle, is a pretty apolitical discussion about what government can do better in the next 20 years to make sure that we have a path back to ourselves. That's what human beings need, but that's also what our society culture needs as well.
Chair Randall, when we think about this as a government problem, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't think that counties were the level of government best able to solve it. So what is Loudoun County doing about this? How have you identified this as a problem? And what are you doing about it? And as a national leader, as chair of NACo's Health Committee, what would be your advice for county leaders, local officials throughout the country, or the U.S. Senate about what the government solutions are?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for NACo for having me here. It's wonderful to be with you, Senator Murphy. Let me just first say that I think that one of the things that's happened is that when you think of social media, it actually says the word social in it. And so I do think there's a disconnect where people believe that being online and being on social media spaces meant they were more connected. You have a Facebook and you have 4,000 friends on your Facebook page, and you're interacting with 4,000 people supposedly, but not interacting with anybody for real. Right, and so I think the disconnect is believing that I have more of these social experiences because I have this thing in my hand, yet not having almost any social experiences. And so I think that governments and counties and families and schools and faith communities and nonprofits and all those things, we have to do a couple of things. One, education is really important. When do you put your phone down and why do you put your phone down? Those are important discussions to have. In Virginia, the governor just actually signed a bill that said that our kids cannot have their phones in schools. They have to put them away for the school day. They can have them during passing periods, but not while they're in class. That's a good thing. It forces you to talk to one another. But I would also say that counties are the places where convening happens. And so it's important for county governments to know that the goal to get to the lowest tax rate possible is not always the goal. Sometimes the goal is to fund the things you need to fund to help take care of your people, whether that is libraries, whether that is parks, all those types of things, to make sure that's there. Secondly, I would say that for many counties, making sure transportation options are there, especially for older people who might not be able to get around otherwise. In Loudoun County, one of the things we just did was make our local buses free. And so if you want to get someplace from here to there, you can get on there on our local buses because they're now free. And we have a great relationship with our nonprofits and with our faith-based communities. Nonprofits are very much a force multiplier in any government. And so lean into them, talk to our nonprofit providers and leaders. Governments were never made to do everything, but there's somebody or some organization that can do it. And I have always been a little perplexed as to why governments don't call on their faith-based and their nonprofit leaders more. We have a very good relationship in Loudoun County, and we push that, and I meet with them on a regular basis. So there's a lot of things that local governments can do, counties can do. And finally, I will say that, my two United States senators are Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Mark Warner. I talk to them all the time, and they listen. So the things that need to be funded at a federal level, we have those conversations, and they know why it's important to me. So county officials, local officials, town officials, make connections with your federal officials who actually will fund some of these projects for you.
Chair Randall, you brought up.
So now I know you.
Yeah, you got three. You got three.
I have three more.
So,
One more exactly.
count me in.
Well, Chair Randall brought up technology and social media, and it's complicated, isn't it, Senator Murphy? Is that in some ways it is a tool for connection, but increasingly, as you've probably witnessed firsthand, it is a way that can socially isolate teenagers. And socially isolate all of us. So where are we on technology and social media? Is it a tool or is it a hindrance?
Well, I mean, listen. There's no doubt it's a tool. But I think what we have learned in the era of social media, Mark, but also coming out of the pandemic experience, is that there's just something fundamentally different between virtual interaction and in-person interaction. I mean, the chemicals in your brain react fundamentally differently when there's somebody there that you can touch and smell and see, right, than looking at them on a screen. And so I think we just have to admit that, right, that our bodies crave in-person interaction, and that there is something very unique about it. So listen, I do view these apps that are sitting on our phones for kids as poisons. Not that there isn't something good that can come from them, but right now kids are getting so much more of the downside than the upside. And there are just some kind of simple decisions we could make to give our kids a fighting chance. And while it's complicated, it kind of isn't that complicated. To me, the real poison is the algorithm, right? I mean, this is essentially a technology designed to addict children away from in-person socialization. That's the purpose, right? Is to capture as much of your attention as possible, meaning to bring you out of communion, healthy communion with friends and family. And so if that's a poison, then just don't turn it on until you're 18 years old. Think of it like a cigarette, right? If you're an adult, maybe you have the ability to kind of manage your time on your phone and off your phone, but you don't have the brain cells to be able to break yourself from an addiction when you're 13. So one of the things I think we should do, and I have a bill with Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton, really conservative Republicans, showing that this issue, has the potential to be bipartisan, would just simply say that when it comes to that algorithm that's capturing your data and continuing to perfect content to you to keep you on the device, that just can't be used for kids. And I think if kids ended up spending more time in person, then they'd have a shot as an adult, having kind of learned those behaviors of the importance of in-person connection, to keep going. But when you show up at adulthood and you just spent 6 to 10 hours of every day on your phone, you really don't have the soft skills to be able to succeed as an adult. So to me, focusing on the kids is probably the best chance to create adults who will prioritize socialization.
If I can add to that, the other issue with young people is they don't have the span of life to know what they're looking at. So you take a 12-year-old girl and she's on social media from morning to night, and the algorithms do kick in, and so she sees somebody who supposedly wakes up in the morning and looks amazing. Her hair is perfect, her makeup's perfect, and she looks fantastic. That 12-year-old girl does not realize that's not real. That's not how people actually look. And so she's comparing what she feels on her inside with how somebody looks on their outside. And your insides will never compare to somebody else's outside. That then starts leading to the anxiety, to the depression, to the suicidology, because you think, I can never be good enough for that. And so it's really important that not only is it pulling you away from your connectedness, but it's giving you a world that's not real. The virtual world is not a real world. And young people just can't know that. As a mental health therapist, I will say that I do not like having virtual appointments. You want somebody in your office. You want to see them. You want to see their nonverbals. You want to see how they're dressed. You want to see how put together they are, because you can make yourself look pretty good from the waist up for an hour-long appointment. But when you walk into somebody's office, there's a different thing going on. So you get the message, but you also get a meta message that you cannot get through a screen. So that's really important. But the other side of that is this: social media and the internet connectedness in all those ways, they might do something different for a child than they might do for an older adult or somebody with disabilities. It's possible that somebody with a disability may not have any connections if it weren't for what they have in the social media or the internet sphere. And so how do you help them balance what they're seeing? You know, if you have someone who's just not going to get out of their house otherwise, you want to do a couple things. One, you want to send people into their home to see them, to have contact with them, to sit with them, to talk with them, possibly and hopefully the same person, so they can see that person's difference over time. But when that can happen, it's okay for that grandmother or that great-grandmother have a connection with her grandchildren online. So it's not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. And I agree with the senator. It's what happens with young people is so damaging, because they don't have the soft skills, and then they don't get the brain connections, because when you have those social experiences, your brain connects differently. Even when it's a bad experience, you know that you can, have it, deal with it, grieve it, get through it, and move on. But if you don't have those experiences, you don't learn those skills. You get to be an adult, and you have people who don't know how to deal with a loss or ever admit a loss happened.
Yeah. Well, so the power of the tech lobby notwithstanding, what we're talking about here seems to be pretty non-political, even certainly not non-partisan. But this issue is getting attention from, it seems like, both sides of the aisle. Governors, both Republican and Democrat, and the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again report had a whole section on social isolation. Mm-hmm. And so, Senator Murphy, when you're talking to your colleagues, are you approaching this from the way that you deal with legislation generally, or is it something that's breaking through these partisan lenses?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm trying very hard to keep this issue as apolitical. I mean, it's not even sort of bipartisan. There's really nothing about this that feels political. So in the Senate, yeah, we definitely have a group of Republicans that are interested in talking about this. From Pete Ricketts in Nebraska, Todd Young in Indiana. Listen, I think that they hesitate when you start talking about kind of intentional government interventions to solve the problem, but I don't think that's really what we're talking about. I mean, it's going to be civil society that ultimately kind of stands up a lot of the alternatives to isolation, but it does have to be government that steps in and at least gives folks a fighting chance. And this is where the conversation comes in around how the federal government and the state and counties can work together, because we do have to have those alternatives. If some kid is going to get off their phone, well, then they need to feel like they've got sort of safe, valuable places to go find each other. And increasingly, that's hard. I mean, I always describe this in I live in Hartford, Connecticut, and Hartford's got a ton of kids. But if you drive around Hartford on a Saturday afternoon, you will not see a lot of those kids, because their moms and dads and grandmothers and grandfathers, they keep them inside because they don't think being outside is safe. That same city, doesn't have a rec basketball league. Like this capital city of Hartford doesn't have a recreational basketball league because they don't have the resources. Every suburb has one. So for a lot of kids out there, even if you get them off of those phones, because of our disinvestment in institutions and in the places that we do tend to find each other as kids and adults, there's not that answer for them. So that's why we have to, work together, and that there's really no avoiding, some government solutions here, whether it's regulating the social media or whether it's building that social infrastructure as an alternative in our states and cities.
Yeah.
What is Loudoun County doing about that? I assume you have similar challenges, certainly in some of your municipalities. Are you really fostering these, not forced, but creating the spaces for people to have rec basketball, to
Yeah,
have
yeah, we do.
community
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. We are, and that goes back down to what I said before, because the senator just said there's a disinvestment. Well, there's a financial disinvestment. And so if you are going to tell your child or tell children or talk to parents or whomever about why their kids need to be out the house, what are the kids going to do outside the house? And so it is important to have the rec basketball league, to fund an after-school programs, especially between 3 and 6, when kids get out of school and they're at their most vulnerable and they need to do something when they're out of school before the parents come home. That time spent is really important. But also in other ways, I mean, I worked really hard to not have our mall closed. Now, part of that's just for my own benefit. I want to have a mall. But also think about people shop online. Think about the shopping used to be a social experience. You grab your girlfriend, your friends, and you go shopping together. People don't do that. Now the Amazon comes by your house and drops off a package and there you are. So there's so many experiences we used to have just automatically that we don't have anymore because you can do it all online. And so when we were getting close to our mall being shut down, I was like, okay, this cannot happen. What do we need to do and how we need to help invest so that our mall stays open? So there's a lot of things to do. Our senior centers, we make sure that, one, we have transportation for our seniors to get there so they can congregate somewhere. We make sure that we have people we have a department in Loudoun that has companion care, where somebody will go to their home and sit with them and stay with them, not just in and out, but to be with them. That's also important because for an older person, you want to watch what they're doing, how they're acting over a period of time. How are they speaking? What is their memory? What is their hygiene like? Those types of things. Those things are all either things that we fund or help fund the nonprofits. So all of these things work together. And so it is absolutely not, it is an apolitical experience, or it should be an apolitical issue. The politics comes in when you have to start raising money to run for office, and then people start writing checks. And now, there might be people who feel beholden to whomever wrote them that check. And so I've taken the position that there's just some places and peoples that I'm just not going to take a check from, period, the end, because it's more important to me to have the ability to make sure that I support things that will increase connectedness than take a check. I will also say, one of the things I love about my job, and I know that most people would think I'm out of my mind, is land use and zoning, which is what you do at local government. You do land use and zoning. Look at your face.
Listen, I spent 1 year on my local planning and zoning commission and realized if I wanted any future in politics, I had to get the hell off the planning and zoning commission.
I love land use and zoning. But one thing you actually do when you do land use is you build communities in a certain way. So you build a community where the congregating area is in the middle of the area, and all around it is where you have homes and where you have attainable homes and where you have all of it in one place. And so how you build your community literally is really, really important. So for all of us super nerdy land use zoning people, it can really combat social isolation and just connectedness in that way also. I did see your face. I am a mental health therapist. I am trained to look at these things.
I have PTSD from my planning and zoning days. So can I just build on your mall point though, because I think this is really, really important. So how do you feel connected? Okay, some of it is just you feel connected because you're sitting at lunch with a friend, right? But some of how you feel connected is by being part of a community, right? A community that cares about you, right? If you have a sense of shared obligation, whether or not you are actually with a human being, that builds a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of connection. And so part of our conversation also is in how do you build those connected communities again? And whether we like it or not, unique local commerce was one of the ways that we created a connection, right? Businesses that had an obligation beyond just how much profit they were making, right? Had an obligation to us. Right. I always remember going every Saturday morning with my grandparents to the local grocer, and we'd go up to the deli counter. And the guy who worked at the deli counter, who worked there his entire life, because back then it was a job that paid enough that you could stick in that for a while, would give me a free slice of Land O'Lakes cheese, right? A free slice, and I thought it was the coolest thing that I was getting a free slice of cheese, and that was my sign that this, grocer, that this grocery store cared about me, right? Cared about me as a human being, didn't just see me as a customer, cared about my grandparents because they wanted to make their grandkid happy. And I knew I was growing up in a caring community. Right. You don't get that feeling when, Peapod, whatever you call it down here, drops off your groceries at your doorstep. You don't get that feeling when all your commerce happens online. So there's a lot of different elements that create a connected community, but the commerce and locally owned commerce is a big part of that.
Yes, that's very true.
I'm going to apologize to your staff because I'm going to give you an idea from Senator Murphy that you might want to take up. Senator Murphy walks across the state of Connecticut every year.
I don't know that you can know. Your county might be bigger than my state.
Might be Superior County, actually.
So you walk across the state of Connecticut every year, and I'm glad to be on this side of that, just as a viewer, as opposed to any sort of logistical implementer. So two things. One is, this is probably not an issue that people would walk up to you and talk about. So one is, how did you identify this as a public health crisis, and one that you're not getting the feedback from when you're walking across Connecticut, knocking on doors, or whatever else it is? And what did you learn from this year's walk across Connecticut, given everything that's going on in our politics and in our federal policy landscape? And just to give you an opportunity to talk about the walk, because I know it's so important to you.
Yeah, it's my favorite week of the year. So I do this thing where I spend a week I walk from one end of the state to the other, about 20 miles a day. And the most important thing is, I know. Well, and when I started, I did east to west, which is like 110 miles. And then as I entered my 50s, I started going north south, which is only about 70 or 80 miles. But it's just a way to talk to a whole bunch of people who are apolitical, who don't watch MSNBC and Fox News every night. And you just kind of get a sense that not everybody is paying attention to the things that we're paying attention to, and what they care about are these evergreen issues, which are the same every year. It's the quality of schools, how much money are they making, how safe is their community. So it just kind of reminds you to work on the same stuff year after year. But it is also true that it is not a topic that people along the walk raise for me, right? When I say, hey, I'm your senator, anything you want me to talk about, what they do is, they go to the compartments that they believe are the legitimate things to talk to a politician about, right? Yeah. And so they'll talk about, schools, which they know is a thing they can talk to a politician about, or taxes, right? But 5 years ago, when I launched this set of work and I wrote a piece called The Politics of Loneliness, I got more feedback from people in Connecticut and all across the country than from basically any other essay I'd ever written, because they recognized it as an issue in their life, and they were now being given permission to talk about it as a political issue, and to talk about it to their politicians, which is exactly what the Surgeon General did with that report, right? He gave people permission to enter into a conversation with their legislators. So I think that's what we have to do, which is why this forum is so important, which is why, putting it on the radar screen of more mayors and county executives is really important, because if politicians talk about the loneliness crisis and the social isolation crisis, you will get hands raised everywhere across your community wanting to give you ideas on how to make it better. And so I think just creating the platform right now is the most important thing.
And I say this all the time, the best elected official has to be willing to be an ex-elected official. So you have to talk about the things that you want to talk about that are not just taxes and schools and things like that. So as a mental health therapist, I talk about mental health all the time. I talk about substance use all the time. I talk about the fact that we have to make sure we have reentry programs for people coming out of jails and prisons, because guess what? They're coming out of jails and prisons. So let's do something with that. And so I think it's a little easier for me, because I went into this, people knowing I'm a mental health therapist. Actually, with me, people email me all the time about their issues. I'm like, I can't handle that right now. So, but I get those emails all the time. I also think, though, this is an issue. People do get confused with being alone and being lonely.
Yes.
Some people actually believe because there's a lot of people around them, then they're not lonely people. But they're not. That doesn't mean they're getting connections. And so that when people start feeling anxious and they start feeling depressed, when they start feeling, they kind of go, well, what's wrong with me? What's going on with me? And it's because, you can be around people and still feel lonely, or you can be alone and not feel lonely. And so you have to know what that is with you and what's going on. And the only way to know that is to give people the platforms to talk about it, and then to destigmatize it, to destigmatize loneliness, to destigmatize mental health, to destigmatize substance use, to destigmatize all of it. Mental health is health. And I say all the time, if you have diabetes, there is something you have to do to take care of your diabetes every single day. If you have mental health or even loneliness issues, there's something they have to do to address that every day. And oftentimes, because of the stigma that we build up around it, they won't talk about it. But it's really important for individuals who have a bigger platform, a bigger megaphone, organizations that have a bigger platform and a bigger megaphone, to talk about these things all the time. And if we do that, then these issues get better just almost automatically. Imagine whenever somebody talks about that sports game, they also are talking about some other issue. Imagine how fast that stigma will go down. And that's the goal. And I actually think that's one of the things NACo does very well, is talk about the secrets. And then after you talk about them, put stats behind them, put numbers behind them, put resources behind them, put solutions behind them, all those things. That's how you get to a solution-based issue, not just understanding what the problem is.
And the solution is somewhat in our self-interest as county governments. We see the downstream effects of this with the increased rate of mental health. Counties are primarily responsible for mental and behavioral health throughout the country. Most incarcerated people at the local level are in county jails. Everything from school safety
Absolutely.
to community connectedness. So we want to solve this problem because we think it will make Americans happier and healthier. But there's also a real governmental interest
Sure.
in this.
Sure.
And do you think that, so I'll ask it this way. If you could wave a magic wand, or both of you could wave a magic wand, solve this problem,
Mm-hmm.
or in 10 years, what would success look like at the local level and the national level? Would we have fewer incarcerated people? Would we have decreased incidence of mental health,
Sure.
fewer calls to the 988
Yeah.
suicide hotline?
Well, I've been accused of being a bit of an optimist, and I will say one of the problems with social media especially is that it has caused us to be coarser. The coarsening of our society is a very real thing. People will say things online that they would never say to you if they were looking at you in person. And so in many ways, if we solve this problem, we would have a kinder society. That doesn't mean it's perfect, that doesn't mean everything goes away, but it's kinder. And maybe that 12-year-old girl just needs somebody to be kinder to her sometimes. So that's the first thing. Secondly, if I had a magic wand, I would completely remove the stigma from mental health and substance use and all those types of things. My father, before he passed away, had been in recovery for almost 23 years and said to me before he passed away, talk about that all the time. Talk about what it was like growing up with somebody who used alcohol, and talk about what it was like to watch me get clean and sober and what changed in your life. Talk about that all the time. So when I talk about the family addiction, I don't talk about it with shame. I talk about it with a lot of pride. One, people should know it was there, and two, people can know that, like any other health problem, it is something that can actually be addressed. And so my magic wand would remove the coarseness. My magic wand would remove the stigma. My magic wand would put phones down unless it's absolutely necessary for young people. My magic wand would tell everybody that when you're 18, you're legal, but you're not an adult. Your brain is not an adult brain. Your brain becomes an adult brain by about age 25. If you don't believe me, go talk to an 18-year-old and you'll realize that that's not actually an adult. And we've told them that they're an adult so that they can go to war. And now they can go to war and smoke and drink, so they think they're adults, and they're not. So my magic wand would help people understand what an 18-year-old brain's actually really doing and what it needs. My magic wand would say to everyone who's older, there's got to be at least one person in that person's life who's talking to them, who's checking on them, who's looking at them. You can't see it right now, but in the audience, I have a lot of people from Loudoun County, our department heads, from our mental health department, social services department, Department of Family Services. I brought with me the person who's over one of our aging commissions is with me. I brought all those people with me today so that we can take this experience, go back and do more planning. And so, and you are right, these things do land on local government. We are the ones who, if you cut Medicaid, if you cut SNAP, if you increase, we're going to pay for all this some kind of way. And the last thing I'll say before I hand it over is, the truth is, we pay for things no matter what. So when you do not have good social connectedness, and when you have too much social isolation, you're going to pay in some kind of way. People are going to get more depressed. That's going to cost. People are going to be suicidal. People are going to hit that 988 button. Some people are just not going to make it out of that. They're just not going to make it out. And so if you do not think this is going to cost, it's going to cost you no matter what, financially and other ways. So invest in your people right now so that you don't have to invest in something else later.
Listen, I think all of that is spot on. And just to double click something, the centerpiece of what you're saying, I'll double click. I'm going to foot stomp it. So I had the administrator of TSA come into my office a couple of years ago, and he wanted to talk about a host of funding issues. But one of the things he really wanted to talk to me about was these viral videos that people were seeing about people abusing TSA officers, and a lot of these incidents on airplanes in which, flight attendants were being treated very, very rudely. And he wanted to tell me that that's not just needles in a haystack that are showing up on your viral video feed. That in fact there is just exponentially more meanness happening on airplanes and at airports than he had ever seen in his entire 20-year career. And you feel that, right? You feel that our culture and our politics have become more coarse and more antagonistic. And I just think that that's to be expected from a country that is feeling more lonely, because that first sentiment you have, and everybody knows it because everybody has been lonely at some point in their life, that first sentiment you have is normally sadness. But it does make you more agitated. Right. You do start to sort of look for somebody to blame for why you feel this way. And if somebody hands you somebody to blame, if somebody serves you up a scapegoat, you're more than willing to take it. And if you get rubbed just a little bit the wrong way in a social interaction you have, you're going to sort of light that interaction on fire more likely than not. So I do agree that I think undoubtedly the Surgeon General has told us that we're going to have a healthier country if we're a more connected country, that you are going to see less people in our prisons, less kids showing up at mental health treatment centers. I do agree with you that maybe the most important thing that will happen is just a country in which people treat each other with more respect, because they sort of walk out their door every day on less of an edge because they kind of know why they exist, that they're part of some shared mission and shared purpose with a group of people that they find common cause with. And if that's the legacy of this sort of growing conversation that's just really beginning now, but man, that's a pretty good legacy.
Yeah. That would be an excellent place to conclude this great conversation, because it's a very hopeful note, and that we'll get back 10 years from now and we'll see if all those things came true. I certainly hope so, but I really want to thank you both for an incredible conversation and for your leadership on this issue. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think we have some great ideas that came from this, and we will keep talking. So Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the County News Podcast. For more news and resources, join us at NACo.org.